one night, I felt like I was just being attacked spiritually. I just felt like, all the things of the world, all the guilt, all the shame, everything I had done, how I destroyed my marriages, my relationships. And here I am, I've got these two innocent souls that I've got to take care of. And I just started crying in the middle of the night. I cried out to God, please hold me, Lord. So, it makes me emotional.
Yeah.
But, he gave me peace at that moment. I asked him so hard, please help me. Can't do this without you. And that was the first time I was able to strip my ego and say, I cannot do this alone.
Hey, Castleview, great to be here this morning. We have a very special guest with me today. His name is Jordi Mayo, and you may recognize him. He is a newer part of Castleview Baptist Church. Jordi, thank you for joining, sitting down with me in the hot seat here today.
Good morning.
How long y'all been coming to the church?
Close to 7 months now.
About 7 months or so.
Yeah,
okay.
Not very long.
How'd you hear about us?
Well, there's a member there. He goes by the name of Pat. He's an
Yeah.
older gentleman.
Yeah.
And he used to be a neighbor of mine
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
We lived across the street from each other. And so I had ran into him after not seeing him for many, many years, ran into him at the supermarket. And we just came across each other in the aisle and, and we started talking, and he invited me to go to church. And I said, sure. And so that following Sunday, there we were.
Were you interested right away? Or was it, I'm just being nice to this guy?
No. I had attended another church, spent a few years there, and I was going through some really tough times and a divorce and stuff like that. And so, not to throw her under the bus or anything, but her family's kind of part of that church.
They were connected. Okay, got it.
And I felt uncomfortable at
Sure.
that point, and so I had split, and I was kind of in this limbo, not worshiping correctly, not going to church. I was kind of falling back on my old ways, so to speak. And then I met the love of my life. I met Rafa. Yeah. And at that time when I did meet her, I was going to that church. And I told her, hey, every Saturday night, the boys and I go to church. This is what we do. And then things kind of got messy and, the church thing, like I said. And so I fell off for a while. So fast forward, I met my old neighbor, Pat, there, and he invited us. And Rafa and I had been talking. We need to find a church.
Good timing.
And so, I feel like God had presented that to us at that time.
Fantastic. So, we've loved having you here at Castleview.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed you went through the new members class a couple of months ago. Correct. You guys joined the church, and just really been good to have you guys. You're just a good family. We've enjoyed spending some time together. You're very encouraging. And you were talking about falling on hard times. That's kind of been a lot of your life at this point. You would send in yourself. One of the things we do in the new members class is we have you fill out your salvation testimony and what brought you to Christ. And boy, yours, I remember when I received it, just thinking, wow, there's a lot that is here behind the scenes that you would never know about.
Yeah, it's, to be vulnerable and to expose yourself. Of course, most people, including myself, have these barriers, these protective walls we put up naturally, right? But I feel that the things I've experienced and gone through, from the start of my life, my childhood, all the way into adulthood, up until, very recently, I feel that if I can help others relate to that somehow, that I should speak it. I should put it out there because, you've said it in church many times. The enemy wants you to feel ashamed. The enemy wants you in bondage, your shame and your guilt. And God wants to release you of those things. And so I feel if I can express that and not bury it, not hide it necessarily.
Yeah, that's funny because there's a fine line there somewhere, right? Like, I don't want to boast in it or sensationalize it or, hey, it was awesome when I was doing all these negative things. At the same time, we've got all of these people at the church that there are some of them that are hopeless right now that go, wow, my life is not picture perfect. And it's not like, this Bible character or these other church members. And so nobody here really relates to me. And so when you hear stories like yours, you kind of go, wow, look what God did with someone like Jordi and where he came from, and look what he's doing with him now.
Yeah, and if I could dig down in the past a little bit, if that's okay, I grew up in a very chaotic home. My biological father left when I was a baby, left my mother and I. My mother remarried a couple years later to who I consider my real father, because that's all I remember.
Yeah.
His name was David, and he was good there for a while. But then, as it came closer to he passed away in a motorcycle accident when I was 9. So tragedy there. But as it got closer to that point, he started becoming physically abusive, and to my mother and to myself, and I had a sister. He had gotten my mom pregnant with my half sister, who also passed away 12 years ago, or due to suicide. So
wow.
Lots of tragedy, lots of chaos growing up. I left home. My mom had remarried once again after he passed away, and this time to alcoholic and another abusive man. And so there was 7 years, I guess, of close to 7 years of just chaos in the home, and I left through violence. I finally was old enough, I guess, to stand up for myself, or I wasn't going to take it anymore, the physical violence and all the psychological abuse, and so I left with nothing but the clothes on my back.
How old were you at the time?
I was close to 17. I was 16.
Almost 17.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't know your biological father.
Correct.
Your stepfather that you would consider your father passed away. You were 9.
Yeah.
In a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
And then mom remarried, and you've got another abusive father figure in the house. A lot of times people will say, and I have noticed this through the years, that you see your earthly father, and that's just kind of the picture you have of our heavenly father, right? And so in your case, you've got somebody that is hard, harsh, difficult, probably looks at you at times as a nuisance.
Right.
Right. This kid's in the way.
Correct.
Did that shape? Did that shape how you saw God for a while? Is that something you had to work through, or was that not true for you?
In a way, I suppose. I really, for a long time, felt I had two visions in my mind. I felt like God was there in some sort of sense. But at the same time, I didn't understand what that meant. So I had the sense that I was being watched, that somehow I was being protected through all this. But at the same time, I felt that I was alone and just in this world of violence and darkness.
Yeah.
And when I left home as a young teenager, with nothing but clothes on my body. I had a chip on my shoulder because I wasn't going to take the bullying anymore from anybody. I was being bullied at school as well. Wow. And so, I'm still trying to go to school, couch surfing at friends' homes, that sort of thing. And I ended up homeless there for a bit, wow. Having to steal to eat and stuff like that.
Did you have a job at the time? You're 16, 17?
Little jobs now and again, working at pizza places, that sort of thing. Yeah. And then eventually kind of ended up with a group of friends that we all kind of congregated together and lived together in a townhome, in Parker. And so we had shelter, but it was still lots of drinking and partying and, just living the wild life.
Yeah. I want to get into that for just a moment.
Sure.
But before we do, was there ever any kind of faith in your home before that? It's a pretty challenging background. Was there any, hey, we went to church at this point, this one individual brought faith into the house, any of that?
There were spots like that. Yeah. So I remember there was a pocket of time where my mom started attending a church. I believe maybe somebody she knew had invited her. And so we were kind of going into that realm. I was maybe 12 years old at this point, so we're talking mid 80s. But it never really spoke to me. I was attending church, fast forward a little bit, a couple years with a friend down the street, him and his family. It was a Lutheran church, and which was a good connection later when I became homeless as a teenager, because the pastor there was reaching out to me. And these were the small acts of kindness that I remember to this day. He would meet with me and ask what I needed and bring me clothing, buy me clothes, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So small gestures of kindness like that.
Yeah.
Really.
So when you thought of the church or faith in general, good feelings for the most part?
Yeah, it was, I would say, good yet uncomfortable. Like I
Okay.
wasn't quite sure. I didn't understand. I didn't understand the gospel. It was all just like alien to me.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't. All these stories and things weren't quite clicking. I wasn't receiving the Spirit yet.
Sure.
You know, to open my eyes and heart.
So then you're living this life, 16, 17, 18 years old. You're in a townhouse. What was that like? You kind of band together with some friends. You kind of alluded to it a minute ago.
Yeah, we were like a pack of wolves. I mean, we were, just, drinking, partying, staying up all night, doing these, minimal wage jobs, just barely scraping by, eventually, I had to get away from that stuff. It's just kind of the evolution of your age, I guess. And so, ended up meeting a girl and, quickly got married, made that mistake, but it wasn't, our marriage wasn't based in faith of God or anything like that. So we didn't have a good foundation. We were together for 7 years, and once again, chaos ensued. And we had 2 children together, my 2 oldest kids now who are adults. And we ended up divorcing after 7 years, and a couple years later, she passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so, it was an auto accident, just more chaos, took the kids in, and then I was with, another woman who I knew since my early teenage years, and we were together, not officially married. And that same week that my ex had passed away, we were expecting a baby. And so, within a week of my ex-wife's death, we had a baby as well. So now, this beautiful woman that I'm with at the time, we're still friends to this day, thank goodness. She goes from 0 kids to instantly 3 children. And, so much pain, so much unresolved issues for me that I was pursuing a life in music. I was working full-time, of course, and stuff like that. But I decided I needed to change careers.
Yeah. And if I can insert this here,
Sure.
you had told me that you became kind of a adventure junkie in a way. And I want to hear a little bit about that, what you kind of started. Do you feel like you were trying to find something, some kind of stability, some kind of meaning, something?
I suffered from low self-esteem, I guess, most of my life. So I was trying to, I guess, now that I can look back on it, I figure I was trying to overcompensate for that somehow. I needed to be the center of the universe somehow. And so, I was really into heavy metal. I was really into music, grew up that way. And I'd been in bands previous. I'd been in every crappy band in town at that point. But
singing, playing?
Both, playing bass and singing. And believe me, I wasn't very good at it either. I had to pick one or the other. I couldn't do both, right? It was just very rudimentary. So anyway, trying to raise kids, going through all this stuff, but I had so much material that I could speak about. And so I was writing lyrics and eventually became a full-time vocalist and ended up forming a band and meeting some guys, and we blew up here in Colorado in the local scene, right? And we became really big fish in a small pond, and we started recording. And we were doing shows and practicing 3 nights a week. So that takes away from your family life. And I was committing so much time to this that I was neglecting my family. And I wasn't a very good father. And I'm out there, and once again, I'm partying and I'm drinking. And
this is ages?
I would say late 20s into my early to mid 30s.
Okay.
This was about 20 years ago at the peak of this, with the music.
Sure.
And so all the debauchery that goes with it, being a front man to a very successful band, I'm sure can imagine the things that are thrown at you. And I was not willing to say no to any of it. I was riding a very big high at the time. Like I said, I had suffered from low self-esteem, and this was boosting my ego. And it was feeding me, and it was a perpetual thing, right? I was sinning constantly and cheating and drinking and just being a drunkard and idiot, just a fool. And I can look back on it now, and I'm not very proud of those moments per se, but it's an experience. It's part of the story, right? So I can use that today to say, look, maybe to somebody who's going through that experience themselves, like, I understand the excitement. I understand the enticement that brings, but it's not fulfilling.
Yeah. It wasn't, would you say that ever satisfied you? Like, did you ever come to a place that you said, you know what, this is it. This is what I wanted. Matter of fact, you probably didn't ever think about your band blowing up and doing super well and getting all the attention you had. If you would have thought that would happen, would you have thought that would have been the satisfaction point? That's really what I'm chasing. That's what I want.
I thought at the time that's what I wanted. I thought that I wanted to be this big star. The band was going to go big. We're going to go far. We're going to start touring, and we understood we had to put work in. But at the end of the day, at the end of the party, the next day, right? You're on a high at that time, that night, that, after a show, and all these people are coming up to you and wanting to talk to you, people you've never met before, just loving you. And that builds this ego. The next day you're empty again, and reality strikes. You got to go home. You're tired. You're hungover. You still have children. You still have a family. You still have a job. You got to, take care of these things. And then you're back into the normal humdrum, and it's not the adrenaline anymore.
Sure.
And so you're always reaching for that adrenaline high once again.
Yeah. And you didn't stop at the band. You also had a stint with a gang, a motorcycle gang. Is that right?
Yeah, and I kind of cringe at the word gang. I don't know why, but in that 1%er motorcycle club world.
Club. Is that the word?
That's the MCs, right?
Okay.
You see these guys with patches. Whatever the name of the club is, you always see an MC.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason for that is they think of themselves higher than like a street gang, right? They're just kind of snub their noses at that.
Got it.
But yeah, so once the band had died down, I was like trying to manage too much of it. We didn't have a manager. I was trying to do everything, and I was kind of pushy and, putting a lot of money into things, for the band, taken away from the family. So anyway, it kind of, it almost destroyed some friendships there.
Yeah.
Luckily it didn't. But the band died out, and within a year I'd bought a Harley, and within that year I was prospecting for a motorcycle club, an outlaw motorcycle club here in Colorado. And
when you say outlaw motorcycle club, what does that mean?
So a 1%er club, and I know we have another member of the church who was just on a podcast recently. He's got kind of a similar story to me. But as far as that goes, so a 1%er is, in the motorcycle world, a long time ago, the American Motorcycle Association had a motorcycle rally in Hollister, California. We're talking, I think it was like late 40s, and it was right after World War II. So all these rowdy veterans had shown up into this town, and they were creating havoc. And so they really were just out there, right? So the AMA had put out a statement saying, most motorcycle enthusiasts are law-abiding citizens, but only 1% of them are, like an outlaw fringe. And so what happened was the Hells Angels took that and ran with it, 1%ers. And that kind of grew from there, yeah. So the 1%er motorcycle clubs are those outlaw motorcycle clubs.
Okay. But that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody in a club. I didn't, like I said, I bought a Harley off a friend. I'd never owned one before. I'd ridden motorcycles most of my life, on and off. But once I got into that motorcycle circle, there was a friend of mine. She kept inviting me to this clubhouse up north. They had family night, and I guess it's how they recruit people, how they get people in. And so I kept saying, no, I don't want to do it. And eventually I gave in, a few months down the road, and ended up going down there. And then next thing you know, I kept going and kept coming back. And before I knew it, I had this group of guys that were kind of being cool to me. And once again, that low self-esteem,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was being accepted into a brotherhood, so to
Yes.
speak. And I decided, well, you know what? I want to do this. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I kind of sensed, it's dangerous. It's the bad boy thing. And I really was always attracted to that for whatever reason, that adventurous thing. I knew I was going to be traveling across the United States, going places. I didn't know how I was going to make it work, but somehow it's going to happen. And I started prospecting, meaning you're basically an apprentice for a motorcycle gang or club, right?
Sure.
And you've got to kind of cut your teeth, and they have to see what you're made of. And it's an abusive sort of relationship. You're running around, you're told to do things, you better go do it or else. I'd been socked up a couple times. Once again, violence was part of my world.
Yeah.
And eventually, within about a year, I was fully patched.
Wow.
And then 7 years of my life in that motorcycle club, 3 of those years, I was an enforcer in the club.
Is that right?
And I'm not a very big, imposing person. But one thing I had was I was able to talk well with law enforcement. I was always able to speak whenever you got pulled over or that sort of thing. But I was also scrappy. Yeah. And I was a fighter. And that was one thing, growing up the way I did, I mean, you had to fight.
Yeah.
And so it kind of, it went with that world,
So you went through quite a bit. I mean, you have that that life when people will look back and say, "Wow, what was the life that everyone wanted to have?" Well, drinking, drugs, alcohol, all the stuff that comes along with that, the music scene, the music scene, the motorcycles. I mean, you got all of this going on. Like, hey, if I could be happy, the world might say that would be what a life. Look at all the stuff that he got to be involved in.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you, and why did you have one? I mean, because at that point you must, in my mind, you're thinking, I've kind of arrived here. I mean, I know I got a family. I'm not taking care of the family. I'm not the husband I should be or the father I should be.
Yeah.
But I'm achieving all these other things. Why the turn?
Yeah, great question. I had left the woman I was with when we had our daughter together. Some years had passed, and once again, I was not there. I was absent, within the club and doing these things, traveling, spending money where I shouldn't have been spending money, because it's a very expensive lifestyle.
Yeah.
You have to go places, you have to eat, you have to have lodging, and so I was doing all these things while trying to still have a job and keep going with that, of course, because you got to have income somehow. I never dealt drugs or did any crazy stuff like that. So when her and I split up, I'd met another woman, and we were together for quite some time, and she got pregnant and had a miscarriage, all while I was in the club, and it was devastating. And she wanted to try again. And I was really apprehensive about it. I mean, it was so hard to go through, as a man. It's hard because nobody really listens or wants to ask how the man is doing. It's, of course, the woman, is suffering. The mother is suffering through this. And so I suffered in silence. And so when she said, "Hey, let's try again," I was really like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But eventually I gave in, and we got pregnant. And I remember going in to our first ultrasound, and the nurse was like, "Oh, there's 2 heartbeats here." And I was confused. I'm like, "Why does the baby have 2 heartbeats?" "Well, you don't understand. You're going to have twins."
Wow.
And so, we're going to have twins.
Yeah.
And I remember just laughing, like, this is, we had the miscarriage, and now we're going to have 2 babies, right?
Wow.
And so the boys, the twin boys, Hawken and River, eventually came to the world, but they came super early. They were micro preemies when they were born, emergency C-section. And so, here I am in the thick of this club and doing all these things while I've got a pregnant wife who now we're having babies, and they're super early. And, they were born, and it was a very scary time. And so at that point, I decided I needed to step away from the club and really concentrate on these 2 little babies, not knowing from moment to moment if they're going to live or die. There's so many complications with that, being in the NICU and spending all my time when I wasn't at work in the NICU. And, if that was first thing in the morning on my way to work, or, absolutely every day after work, I would make my way to the NICU and spend a few hours there all weekend, every weekend there with, mama and myself. And so the boys eventually came home, one at a time. And there was complications with all of that, of course. And we were married, but we didn't have God in our life. There were times that, of course, you're scared and you pray to God. Just suddenly you're like, well, I better try something here.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I'd gotten
that
out
higher
of the club.
being almost. I mean, if you're out there.
But our marriage wasn't faith-based whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so once again, I had a relationship that was falling apart, and we're both at fault. I'm never going to point the finger and say she did this, she did that, because I also was guilty of so many things, not being faithful to her, and not, while I was in the club, there's so much going on, right? And so I realized at this point, it was kind of like, I guess God was working his way into my life. I'm such a hard learner, so hard-headed. But with these babies, I knew it was, at this point, for whatever reason, now I better start paying attention to my family. Mm-hmm. And so then I did.
Yeah.
And, some years had gone by, and, maybe 6 years or so. And our marriage, eventually we got divorced, and I ended up with emergency custody of the boys. And, so here I am now, single. I'm much older. I live in a crappy apartment. I'm taking care of these two little boys. I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying to work, but I'm a blue collar guy. You got to be at work super early. And so I wasn't able to make it. I was really just scraping by barely, making sure that I had enough food for them. There was times where I would go hungry. I made too much money on paper. I couldn't get any help. But I was struggling to pay my rent. I was struggling to pay the bills. And one night, I felt like I was just being attacked spiritually. I just felt like, all the things of the world, all the guilt, all the shame, everything I had done, how I destroyed my marriages, my relationships. And here I am, I've got these two innocent souls that I've got to take care of. And I just started crying in the middle of the night. And I cried out to God, please help me, Lord. So, it makes me emotional.
Yeah.
But, he gave me peace at that moment. I asked him so hard, please help me. I can't do this without you. And that was the first time I was able to strip my ego and say, I cannot do this alone. And
wow.
So that's my testimony there.
How long ago was that? How many years?
Oh, man. Close to almost, I'd say 5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't know what to do, what to say.
No.
You just called out to God, right?
Yes,
God,
absolutely.
God help me.
Yeah.
I love that. The Bible says, draw nigh to God, he'll draw nigh to you, right? So even though you weren't pursuing him at that point in your life, there was something in you that said, you know what? None of this stuff satisfies. I mean, the drugs, alcohol, women,
right.
Fame, music, motorcycle, none of this is it, right? And so you said that when you called out to God, there was a peace. What do you mean by that? Describe that.
I feel at that moment I cried. I was going through this battle in my mind. It felt like just the spiritual warfare going on. And I truly believe that does take place. And
Absolutely.
When I cried out to God in the darkness, I mean, it wasn't in my mind. It was physically, Lord, I need you. Please come to me.
Yeah.
I fell into a deep sleep finally. I felt like a child whose mother was comforting him, holding him close. I fell asleep, and I was able to finally just feel that peace.
Rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And much needed.
Yeah.
And I knew it was scary. I didn't quite know what this meant, but I knew I was going to be okay. And, I'd mentioned earlier, I always had a sense that I was being taken care of or watched. I'd always had that in my mind that someday, no matter what it was I was going through and what time, what age I was, someday this is going to be a distant memory. You're going to be okay. Someday this is just going to be in the past.
Yeah.
Whatever it is today is going to be in the past. This will all be a memory to you.
Wow. Wow. What has changed in your life since you turned to Jesus? What difference did it make?
Well, like I've said before, I'm a hard learner. Okay. I'm very hard-headed. And it's the fact that I've had to give up the ego and to understand what it really means to be loved. What love, the divine feeling, it's the love that God gives us.
Yeah.
And that in turn, we're supposed to love others, because I carried so much hatred at times towards others. I said before too, I had a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't going to be bullied any longer. And I was fighting constantly. Somebody would look at me sideways or bump into me. And it was, just
Anger.
warfare. Yeah, just all the time. But it started getting me in trouble. And I realized that in order for me to have some sort of peace, because I had never known peace, and I've said this to some friends before, I had never known peace. And just recently, one of those friends I had said that to, I spoke with, I'm kind of going off on a side road here, but I just spoke to him. He lives in another state. And I said, brother, I finally know peace. And I explained to him why.
Yeah.
I found God. I found Jesus. Jesus had never left me. I finally came back and I explained it to him. And he's not a God-fearing man, I would say, but I wanted to share that with him.
Yes.
And I want to share that with others too, because I feel that if you can relate to what I'm saying in any way, I'm here to tell you that your cause is not lost. You are not. You're not lost.
You're not too far gone.
You're not. You're never too far.
So, do you have times where you struggle with, wow, could Jesus have really forgiven me of all of that? Or have you been able just to absolutely, I take him at his word, he said he does. And, we talked Sunday about this, confess our sin, and he's faithful and just to forgive us. Has that been a struggle for you, or do you just feel like, no, I've taken it at his word and I'm moving forward?
No, it is a struggle. There's times where I feel that my old habits come in, and I realize, sometimes I have a little bit of clarity there, and I'm like, I'm not worshiping God correctly. And so what's happening is, at least in my opinion, is that sin is starting to creep in again. And so I'm able to recognize it, and I sense it. I'm very in tune with certain things, I think, and I'm like, you're not doing something. You're missing the mark somehow. You need to reassess. You need to go to God. Yeah. And I find that there are those times where I get back into the old ways of, I can handle this. I've got a solution. And I'm here to tell you, you don't.
That was your whole life. I got this.
Yes.
I can handle this. I don't need this.
I've got these two hands.
Yeah.
I've created so much with these hands and built so much, and I've also destroyed so many things with these hands, including myself. I'm a very self-destructive person. Yeah. And without God in my life, I know that I will turn back into that. Yeah. Self-destructive. I may not be the wild drinker, drunkard, womanizer, whoremonger man that I once was, but somehow, some way, I'm gonna go back to the sin without God there. So I've had to tell myself, listen, you can't do this by yourself. Speak to God. God knows what you need. Yeah. Just talk to him. Yeah. Just pray. Yeah. It doesn't need to be in a certain way. It doesn't need to be like just open your heart and be real.
Yeah, be real.
Be as real as you can.
What would you say to maybe a teenager who's hopeless and maybe on the brink of that, hey, I'm just going to go, forget all of this. I'm just going to go and do my thing. This is faith, isn't it? Or church, isn't it? I'm just going and enjoy my life. What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I was that teenager too. And I would say that, with any luck, you'll grow old one day. And you'll hopefully understand. It may be a long process. It's a long road for some like me. But I would say just hang in there. Never give up. One, never give up on yourself, and don't listen to the world, the lies that the world wants to tell you, right? That you're worthless or you're not worth anything. You're worth so much. God knows how much how great you are and how He created you.
Yeah.
You're part of His kingdom. And you just got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in God.
Yeah.
And when God tells you that you're worth so much, He knew you before you were ever formed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Never forget that.
Yeah. The Bible says the way of the transgressor is hard. The way of that person that is just breaking the rules and disobeying God's law. Did you find that was true?
It's absolutely. Man, I could go on for days, and it's not to brag or anything like that. It's like I said, I'm a hard learner, and I've spent so much time just being so stubborn. I don't want to do this because why?
Yeah.
You're just making life so much harder on yourself.
Yeah.
And life is going to be hard at times. Of course it is. It's life, right? But you've got to take what you have and be so thankful for what you have. I wake up every morning, and my routine is I get up, I go downstairs, and my back always hurts. So I squat down as my coffee's brewing, and I pray right there. And I thank God. One of the first things I do is thank you for putting me on your wake up call. On your wake up list today. Yeah. Thank you so much for another opportunity. Yeah.
It almost sounds like there's a word that is different between the Jordi of growing up and all of that lifestyle and now, and that word's humility. I mean, there was a sense in you for a long time. I can do this. I've got this. I'll take care of this. I can handle this. And you had to come to the end of yourself at some point to say, you know what? I can't. I don't have peace.
Right.
I don't have things figured out. I'm trying to fill up with everything else in the world, but nothing satisfies me. I know that the only one that can really do that is Jesus.
Absolutely. And even today, I thank God for all those experiences, because if that means that, I guess what I'm saying is I don't really know what my spiritual gifts are, but maybe this is it. Maybe there's an opportunity here for me to speak to people, to tell them my story. And it isn't my story. It's my path to God, right? It's how I was able to get there the hard way, the long way,
the long way.
And I'm still working at it, man. I'm just barely maybe crawling as a Christian today,
And you'll join the rest of us in that, right? I mean, we're all just figuring it out. But if we could maybe even kind of wrap it up with this thought, what is different about your life now as opposed to before?
I'm very, I think I'm friendlier today. I'm very open to meeting people, speaking with people. I'm very, trying to be more forgiving, not only of people, but of myself, have some grace. The old me, very angry, very much a fighter and trying to kind of plow his way through everything. Whereas today I'm just like, when I feel the chips are against me and things are stacked against me, I'm going to turn to God.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask God, because He's never left. He's always been there throughout this whole thing. All the times I spent in a jail cell for, these minor things I was doing, but stupid, right? It's like, I don't want to forget those times.
Yeah.
I don't want to ever forget that night I cried out to God and asked Him for help.
Yeah. Yeah. Your story, Jordi, makes me think that, the Bible says that if you confess your sin, He does forgive you. And there's so many people, I think, that feel as if, for most people, right? For the kid that was just disrespectful to mom, he can forgive that. For the person that was just in a wrong relationship or did a little alcohol or a little soft drugs or just those little minor things. But boy, if you knew what I did, I mean, if you knew where I lived, if you knew what I thought, if you knew some of the motives of my heart, God would never forgive that. And I just want people to hear, as they hear your story, that no, the Bible says God will forgive. it's not that your sin was smaller and so God could forgive that. It's
Right.
His grace is greater
His
than
love is
any
greater.
sin. His love is greater than any sin you could commit.
Absolutely. You've got to understand that is so true. And without God, without any of it, we're all doomed, right?
Yeah.
We're all doomed, and we're doomed to repeat the cycle of destruction.
Yeah.
God is the only way.
Well, think about your story. You're saying, man, I was so wicked in the motorcycle clubs and the singing and all of this.
Yeah.
Well, think about the New Testament and that one man, Paul. I mean, it was worse than that for him, right? Right? You say, well, it's really bad for Jordi. That was really, I don't know if God could save something like that. Paul was way worse than that. I mean, he's literally killing Christians, right? He's literally persecuting the church. He hates the church. He hates Jesus, and Jesus comes to him and takes his life and redeems him. Same thing with Peter. I mean, well, I've done some really bad things. Well, Peter denied the one that he had been with, the one that met his needs, and the one that spoke into his life and invested and poured into, and even predicted, you're going to do this. And Peter goes and he sins. And Peter does think, this is it for me. I'm going to go back to fishing because Jesus will never put me back in ministry. And Jesus comes right back to him.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing, I think, is we maybe don't truly understand. I'm not a theologian. I don't know biblical verses by heart or anything. Like I said, I'm still very much learning, as we all are, right? We're all students. But I know this, that God is bigger than anything you can even put your mind to. Yeah. When I look at how the world works, everything is connected to itself, the ecosystem, the oceans and the mountains and the deserts. And then you expand out to the solar system and how it's all in conjunction with itself, to the galaxies. And, I worked at Lockheed Martin in Waterton Canyon a few years back on the job I was doing, and they had this huge photograph from the Hubble telescope, and it was all these galaxies, and just thousands and thousands of galaxies. Yeah. And I remember standing there in that hallway looking at this giant photograph, just amazed at the work of God.
Yeah. And when you see something like that, it does two things in my mind. First, it makes you feel very small. I mean, we're a little speck on the earth, but then you start adding these galaxies up and you go, that's amazing. But the second thing I think it does immediately, if you really think about it, is makes God really big.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, if God were able to do that, look how little I am. But boy, that just makes you realize how great our God is.
Yeah. And if God can do all that, he can forgive you of everything. Just you need to go to him and ask him.
Absolutely.
Lord, you are my Lord and Savior.
Yeah, that's a great word to end on, Jordi. Listen, thank you so much. I hope that there are people out there that would hear this story, hear what you've been through. They may see you on Sunday, not know anything about you, just look at you like a normal church person walking in, happy, go lucky, things are good, and be able to say, wow, you know what? If he was there and God could forgive him, I know that God could forgive me because of what I've done as well. And church, I just got to tell you, there may be some people in your life right now that you say, they need to hear this. Let me encourage you to share this. What an incredible testimony of the grace of God. There is not a sin that you can commit that is outside of the reach of the love of Jesus. And here we have a living testimony right here in our church. And I'm so thankful for Jordi sharing his testimony. And maybe you're listening to this right now and you say, you know what? I'm him, but just a few years before, right? You're in the middle of it right now. You're searching for something, looking for something to satisfy that itch or that hole that is in your soul. And I'm just telling you, and based on Jordi's testimony and the Word of God, the only thing that can fill a God-sized hole is God himself. And if you need anything, if we can help you in any way, reach out to us, let us know that. And we would love to be able to point you to the one that can truly satisfy like nothing else can. Hey, Castleview, thank you so much for joining us today and watching this episode. We will see you again next week.